Luke Komiskey, welcome to the Entrepreneur Next Door. Thank you for taking time to do this. Let's start with a relatively short introduction. Not too many secrets revealed, just who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, my name is Luke Komiskey, and I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I run a company called DataDrive that does data analytics specifically for small and mid-market organizations.
So when you say you run it, it's yours.
Yeah, I founded DataDrive 7.5 years ago, and it's gone through its own evolution of services and offerings, and that I'm sure we'll get into. And yeah, it's been a very fun journey of entrepreneurship.
Okay, perfect. So you went to school in Wisconsin and you were kind of like a business and a tech major. What was your first job after college?
Yeah, so my college background was within computer science and information systems. I was one of those guys that always really loved working with math, and computer programming felt like that next evolution of it. And then coming out of college was at the time when people were really focusing around like building mobile apps. And for me, I wanted a job that had a little bit of the programming experience, but also an opportunity to work with business owners and business leaders to understand what makes their business tick. So my first job was officially a data engineer at Cargill, big world's largest private company. But data engineer in a nutshell is building data pipelines to move data from point A to point B.
Okay, so I have a pretty wide audience. Some of them are SaaS founders and techies. Many are growth marketers, entrepreneurs. And I always like to simplify, particularly when we get to some jargony, techie stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to pretend to be smart and say, okay, I know what a pipeline, data pipeline is. So explain it to an 8-year old.
Yeah. So when organizations are growing, they're using a lot of different SaaS applications. They're using CRM systems and ERP. There's a lot of data that's being entered by frontline workers doing the transactions, running the business process. And all of these applications have bits and pieces of information that, if and when brought together, can create the transparency and create the visibility for leaders to understand the pulse of their business instead of relying directly just on the gut of how they feel like their organization is actually doing. That data doesn't lie. The challenge with bringing that all together is that these applications are all sitting in different databases or sitting in different applications. And so the concept of data engineering and data pipelines is building these integrations, building automations that can actually pull the data out of these source systems into a central spot that many people call one source of truth or a data warehouse. And the whole purpose of a data warehouse is really to create governed insights to build trust that this is our data, this is the truth of it, and to shape the data in a way that's going to be analytically useful for people to ask questions really easily over potentially millions and billions of records about their organization.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to that. I want to go back to so your first job is Cargill, huge company. What was the most impactful job you've had before founding the company
Yeah,
you
great
have
question.
today?
So immediately after having my first job, which was in more or less corporate America, I had a really cool opportunity to join a bigger consulting operations called Slalom Consulting. What was great about that is, one, it was my first time getting into consulting, so just understanding how to move from being a corporate employee into actually a consultant that has to move between a lot of different clients in a given day. But more importantly to my entrepreneurial journey is when Slalom opened up an office in Minneapolis, I was the first analytics hire in the market. And what that gave for me is exposure to people, very seasoned consultants and salespeople, to understand the P&L of a profitable consulting operation, to understand how to sell services, how to package services. So much of that job was not only learning how to consult and do data analytics for organizations at a faster pace than I ever imagined, but more importantly, understand the metrics behind an organization. What does it take to actually build operations and flex on and sales? And that was probably one of the most impactful jobs that I could have been paid to do.
So interesting that you get a new perspective, right, from working for somebody in, I'm going to say in a cubicle because that's how everybody starts, into consulting, which is it's a completely different thing, right? It's the difference is when a company hires you as a consultant, um, you have the responsibility to deliver value. right? Because they paid you for that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
So it's more nerve wracking, but it's also a lot more exciting. And the excitement comes from I have to do really, really good work in order to deliver on what I promised the client. But it's also exciting because it leads to referrals and more business in the future, right? So if you provide that value and you solve a problem, then that's an easy way to grow your business.
yeah, yeah. It's incredibly fast paced, and what I loved about it is just for me. Once I got into consulting, I've just recognized how I've been able to meet a lot of interesting people at a faster pace. Usually, when you're in an organization, you kind of know the people you're working with and don't really think beyond those four walls. So you meet a lot of people, and then especially when you think about data analytics is very directly tied to how a business operates. And so just looking back and reflecting on my 10 plus years now of doing consulting, is I've helped at this point over 500 organizations just do something with data, and that's 500 different business models and how they think. And I think that's probably the thing that keeps me in consulting is the variety that comes with just meeting business leaders, understanding how people run their businesses. It's incredibly fascinating, and then be able to dig into the data behind the scenes is so much fun.
Yeah, and I spent my entire career in the small business world and family-owned businesses, which is very, very, it's super dynamic and challenging, but it's also a great, great exercise in human psychology and behavior. Because when you work for entrepreneurs, or to me, entrepreneurship, small business owner, they're sort of interchangeable, but I distinguish entrepreneurs as early startup founders of companies, and small business owners are people that have had the business for a while, right?
Mhm.
There's an organization, there's track record, there's some traction, they've done some things. But for this purpose, we'll use it the same way. They are very, very protective of their business. Many of them are have big egos, as I'm sure you came across, and sometimes you can sit in front of an owner, and I've been one of those people that work for an owner and say, "Look, two plus two is four." There's, like you said, numbers don't lie and data doesn't lie. And then the arguments could be about, okay, but where did the data come from, right?
Yeah,
Math is easy,
yeah. And
right? Two plus two,
I
right?
welcome those conversations too, because I think some of the best consulting projects I've worked on over my years is being able to challenge people's intuition and how they thought the world was operating. And I think it's smart to have, what I love about working with small businesses is you've got a very invested leadership team, of invested founding team, that you get to challenge some of their assumptions around how they are going to market and what's actually successful that could lead to exponential growth in ways they didn't expect, all just by digging through the data that they've been storing the whole time.
So let's talk for a little bit about, we said small business. I don't know how you define small business in terms of your, we'll call it ideal client, right? Um, oh, maybe I'll let you answer. What you said, small business, medium enterprise. Let's talk about small business because that's mostly my audience. How do you define small business in your world?
Yeah, so small business definitions for me, I mean, generally I just kind of think about it in terms of either like revenue size or employee size. For me, like when we go after small business, it could be small business could be organizations that are doing up to like 50 million in revenue, which is actually quite a large operation.
Hmm.
But it's amazing, I think, with how technology kind of plays into businesses nowadays, that you can actually have a very small team but large revenues. You can have a large team but still have like a relatively small operation. So for me, I kind of think of it in terms of like probably like less than 50 people or 100 people, less than 50 million. It's a very fluid definition. And I think for me, when I think about analytics and small business, it's about where they're at in the maturity of how they're using data. That at first, a lot of organizations are getting by just using spreadsheets to get a grasp on how their organization is doing, weekly leadership metrics. But as we start to focus in on doing data analytics with small business owners, I want them at the stage where they're pretty locked in on their business model. They've figured out a way to make money, and analytics can be a great way to add gasoline to that fire.
So I want to tell you a funny, but I guess in today's universe, it might be tragic story. Well, maybe not tragic, but funny. So I spent 18 years in the medical industry, 15 years with one company that was a family-owned business. Um, we were running on a AS400 system, IBM system mini, but we had a warehouse and we have a bunch of products that we distributed in addition to manufacturing. We had one guy, his name was Ira, who was brilliant, brilliant guy. And he managed the inventory. Not They didn't want to use the S400 at the time. It was System 36. They didn't want to use that. They insisted that Ira create multiple spreadsheets uh, in order to manage the inventory, and it was so complicated that no one understood them except Ira. And the funny piece of the story is that Charlie, who was a warehouse manager, and it was a fairly big warehouse with a lot of SKUs, was always coming to me as the VP of marketing and says to me, "Can you talk to that guy? He always orders the things we don't need. The things that we need are never on his spreadsheets, right?" So I want to ask you, because you're the expert for small business owners. We're using the word data a lot. Okay, can you define for a, let's say, 10, $15 million company, even seven, what is included in data, right? Other than email and CRM, customer relation management, sales data that comes from whatever enterprise system they use, if they use it. What
Yeah.
else is data in your world?
Yeah, I mean it's just a digital representation, right, of something that's happened or something that you have. So there's of course, the CRM system is going to have information about your customers, about your marketing activities, what emails have been sent, what emails have been opened. But you've also got to be thinking about organizations might have invested in uh, enterprise resource planning tool, ERP. So that this is where you start getting into inventory data and just like any kind of manufacturing processes that might be taking place through that system. Really, anytime you have any kind of representation of an item that you have, a service that you offer, a price that you gave, a customer you've contacted, those are all that interaction, how you play with that, how you sell it, that all creates a digital footprint of data that's really interesting and fascinating to be able to bring together and be able to mold in a way that you can say how do we do more of the things that are doing really well and less of the things that aren't working. And that's really what it comes down to, is just grounding everything in facts. But there's a lot of data out there, and it doesn't even need to be necessarily quantitative data. You can start getting into things like documents and images and video recordings that there are, even those create their own data sets that you can analyze about, how things are written or what things took place during a webinar. There's a lot of different insights you
Mhm.
can pull out of various media types nowadays.
Can we use the word information instead of data, or is it different?
For me, information, it's pretty darn close, and it's probably just like pulling hairs at this point. But I mean, data is just anything that's being created behind the scenes. Information, I think, is kind of a level higher, where you've molded it in a way that people can stay informed from that information or be informed by that information. So I think the organization of data eventually becomes information. But again, those are like splitting hairs. But I think a lot of data is being created. There's useful information within that can be pulled out.
So is the difference between the two uh, the fact that data can be manipulated and analyzed, information might be more maybe generic, right? I have
Hmm.
information that people don't like a product. Okay, where does that come from? Well, if it
Yeah.
comes from surveys and reviews, okay, so that's data. We can actually look at it. But to me, sometimes information is subjective, right? We went to a trade show, and one of the words that I dislike when people use it, and you'll appreciate it because you're a data guy, when someone starts a conversation with a lot of people told me, I just, please stop.
Yeah.
If you're trying to impress, don't tell me how many. A lot doesn't mean anything especially in today's world. But that's where a lot of times information comes, filters through a company, and it comes from subjective sources, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in that example, right, information can be sourced from actual factual data behind the scenes. It can be pulled from people's opinions, right? It's how you're informing another individual on something. But for me, a lot of what we try to think about is like, how do we ground that in, like data driven is kind of a trendy term to debate, right? Because you don't want an
Mm-hmm.
organization necessarily to be driven by data, so they're so blind that they're not considering all these other things that can't be quantified through data. But there are this like data informed, right? So you want to use data to be able to help nurture a decision you're trying to make, to help nurture the information you're giving out to your audiences.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, especially particularly because that's your business. The data might show one thing, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to make a decision based on the results or whatever analytics you're looking at. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with intuitive decision making, right? The data might point to one thing, but as an owner of a company, and owners tend to be, most of the successful ones tend to be risk takers,
Mm-hmm.
right? They like to buck the trend. But generally speaking, for day to day operations, you would probably tell somebody, listen, on basic functions of your business, when you look at the data, you should conclude what it tells you because it's operational issues. But when it comes to more like my universe of marketing and leadership and let's say retention within a company, right? Yeah, you might have some good retention. A lot of employees are staying, and that's the HR piece of maybe data. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody's happy, right? You need to
Yeah.
go beyond that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It makes me think about, so for the reason why entrepreneurs, small business owners are so successful is because they likely have this X factor of intuition about how a market actually exists, right? If everything was very factually data oriented, it would be easy for, in theory, anyone to spin up a new business, new service, because if you just follow the data, it's bound to work. And I think that is the X factor of all of these entrepreneurs that we talk about. It's, for me, a lot of the, we want to use data is help scale the intuition of a business owner, right? So
mhm.
at once you get to a certain scale, you've got a lot of other people that have to make a lot of micro decisions throughout the day, and it's going to be next to impossible for an entrepreneur to be able to scale all the little decisions that they made when they were a team of one. And so data can create a common foundation, a set of rules that people could follow. And 80-90%, it creates the outcomes that the entrepreneur or small business owner is expecting. And that is really where like data can help scale an organization, because you're helping support everyone make their decisions throughout the day based off actually what's happened in the past, the data
Mm.
that you've left behind when you first started the organization.
Yeah, and we're using the word intuition. And if anybody hasn't read the book Blink, they should. I mean, intuition is a real thing. It's not like voodoo. It's not magic. Somebody has it, somebody does it. But when you really understand how do you arrive at intuition, it's pretty straightforward. It's a accumulation of multiple experiences, most of which you don't remember. It's just your brain processes them faster than like the biggest AI engine that sits up here. And then when you come across a scenario or situation or a competitive uh, uh, situation for your business, you you get that intuition, and it's really what it means is your brain draws from prior experiences, from maybe all the data points and all the analytics you've done in the past, and it sort of pushes you towards a gut feeling, a gut decision making. But it's not just the gut as in magic, it's a gut based on maybe the information the data drive provided to you, right?
Yep.
Over time.
Yep.
So, one thing that comes to mind, because I believe in analytics and I believe in what you do, and I think it's absolutely critical. It's just one of the pieces that every entrepreneur should have when they make smart decisions, right? Make intelligent decisions. Don't just always shoot from the hip and be reactionary. But one of the things that came to mind before as you were talking, and I said, and this is not about politics, but it happens a lot in politics, right? When they do surveys all day long, and this particular candidate is going to have a landslide win, and the elections come around, and all of a sudden, boom, totally opposite,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how does Luke explain that?
Yeah, and I
I
think,
don't want to put you on a spot, but it's important. That's
no,
the
all
world we
good.
live in. Yeah.
Think when I think about, like, it's kind of two major events really over the last like few years. Like politics has always been a thing, but of course politics has become even more political lately. And so there's like politics, and also think about COVID, right? COVID, all of a sudden COVID comes around and people magically are able to understand and read exponential growth and exponential charts, right? When I think about how data is used to like mold an opinion or at least state a perspective, I mean, for me, I think the challenges that we as an entire society have now is just a data literacy gap, the ability to understand when data is presented to us, when statements are made. There are ways that you can craft the English language. You can craft charts to hide the fact that things around like sample size and margins of error. And I think so much of, I think for us to elevate as a society is that, news can state information and can phrase something in a certain way, or can build a chart that has in the small little footnotes down below of like, we only surveyed 100 people and it could be plus or minus 10%, which would massively sway a lot of these like charts that we look at.
Yeah.
And I think it's through that what I try to get people to like elevate is around the like being able to hear information but interpret it in their own way. Of like, numbers are hard for people to naturally comprehend, some more than others, and just being mindful about, there's always agendas when it comes to like COVID and politics, and man, even COVID became political, to be able to like give information out and then make your own intuitive decision around what you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing in that data set, but understanding all the little footnotes that they tend to put in size 8 font at the bottom of it.
Yeah, and because we're talking about COVID, the one thing, so back to you, the data after you do the analysis might show a number. In the COVID day, and this was manipulated in the wrong way, the piece of data that was accurate was more people die from the flu than COVID, right? And that was
Hmm.
released out there, especially because nobody wanted to take it too seriously. So when you look around, you say, you know what? That's interesting. It can't be that bad, right? Until you ask your neighbors and friends, how many people do you know that actually died from the flu? I don't know anybody, but how many people do you know that are in the hospital today dying from COVID? And now all of a sudden, right? So this is the data. So the data point is right at that time,
Hmm.
but how you present it and how you push people to think a certain way, that's the subjective piece that's always risky. And in a business situation, I've been in many meetings where the data pointed one way and I'd say we refused to believe it. We knew that it was accurate, but we didn't believe that the sample data indicated the general competitive conditions, let's say,
Mm.
right? You might disagree with that, but I mean, so ideally, your worldview is numbers don't lie, data doesn't lie. Here's what I give you is a picture based
Hmm.
on information that comes from your own systems. How you interpret it, you should interpret it based on what is looking at you straight on the screen. What actions you take on it, that completely subjective. Right? Some people might take completely different action, but the data piece, you're saying trust the data. Otherwise, why collect it?
But also like, keep in mind that data entry, data collection is also very human based activity, right? So like, case in point of COVID, the data collection processes, like how people were even asking the same questions or even surveying hospital systems, right? That
Mm-hmm.
those are all human activities around the accuracy of if that data is coming in and what time it is, how accurate it even is. So yes, data doesn't lie, but you also have to keep in mind, and this is a challenge we see in many organizations, is that if your frontline stakeholders are entering no data or poor data into your ERP, your CRM, your whatever system you're using, they're not following some kind of governed process. It's going to be garbage in, garbage out. And that is where I think people, like, one of the biggest challenges that we have when we implement data analytics for organizations is that first executive dashboard we might build for somebody will be like, well, this isn't right at all. And it is right based off the numbers that were put into the system. But that is when you need to start building a culture around governance and following process, because it can lead to better insights when you put proper guardrails and put proper process and definitions around how you're entering that data.
So what it in I think you've had DataDrive for 7 years, right? If I remember
Yep.
correctly. Is there one interaction with the client where you made and I'm going to use the word not quantitatively nice word, but huge difference? Like really impacted the company based on the work you did, without disclosing who they are, but just talking about that as a case study.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Like, there's a lot of them. I'm like trying to think of like the big one.
Like the one thing that if I said to you, look, you're retiring tomorrow. You've had whatever years in this thing. When you look back, what is one? Think of one company where you work through. was disruptive in a positive way. It made a huge impact on the business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the coolest ones, and just disruptive in the sense that is a really cool use case, because we have more than enough projects where we've helped profitable organizations become more profitable. But one of the ones that's like not necessarily a big project, but a big impact was we've worked with a science museum that is largely funded by donor donations. And of course, they've got tons of history about gift giving, who these people are that are giving the gifts, what life stage they're at, age, address, all that great stuff. And it's easy enough for them to go into their donor system to identify who is our top donor. They know that they can sort by sum of donations and easily see that. I think one of the most impactful projects that we've done is you can start to understand the timing of when somebody gave a donation, where they live, their demographics, any kind of other history that we may already know about that person, and start to work our way backwards. And so we would call those people whales, the people that are the big donors that we already know about. But then taking that logic down to like let's identify the dolphins, right? The smaller whales, I don't know. And being able to identify who are the people that we haven't really been nurturing or talking to, and how can we create more marketing activities, marketing events to bring those people that are based off our analysis and our algorithm are on the cusp of being able to give to this nonprofit science museum organization. And that was really impactful because we've built that finite list. They're able to put together catered events towards like specific zip codes and areas to try to drive those people into giving more. And not that I can take absolute credit for it, but within the 6 months after we completed that project, there was an anonymous donation. One of the largest anonymous donations was given to that. Of course, because they're anonymous, I have no idea who that actually was, but I would like to think that it was because of all the marketing activities that we've helped point their direction towards the right people in their operation.
It interesting. And again, to kind of keep it simple, um, a friend of mine has a very successful credit card processing company,
Hmm.
and one of the things that differentiates them from others are the analytics, and the major 80% of his clients are restaurants. And I remember one day, and I said to him, "Well, what? I mean, I swiped the card, so what type of analytics is built in that I really should care about?" And he gave me a tour of what that is, and then like my eyes opened up. So it's not just about how much money I spent that day by swiping, but you also have the data of what I ordered that day and
Yeah.
what was on special that day. And so when you take all that information, and now many of the restaurants, tend to capture your personal information through either offering you the free Wi-Fi, which is not free, but you have to put in your email address. But so what can you do with all this analytics? Well, if I happen to like chicken parmesan and it was a special that day, and historically I keep ordering or coming back when that's a special, then you can let me know a week in advance that that's going to be on the menu, right? Or of course, basic stuff. What are the best selling dishes? What do people tend to do? Drinks, etc., which allows you to not just manage your client interactions by showing them that you know enough about them and you care, but also from a financial standpoint, managing your the dishes that you plan, the bar, all the other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm purposely maybe oversimplifying the stuff that you guys do, but that type of information, when you pay attention to it, allows for smart, intelligent decision making. So, do you ever come across someone that where you make a pitch and then it'll be mostly smaller businesses and the owners say, "Nah, look, I don't need all that fancy stuff that you guys come up with. I know my clients. I've been in business for so long. Uh, I don't think there's anything you can teach me or tell me something I don't know." Do you ever come across
Mhm.
somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times in just the selling process of selling data analytics, I mean, it is a line item that kind of teeters on the point of like huge value add that adds exponential growth because we're doing more things, or it can be easily seen as just an expensive line item, right? It's kind of like marketing too. It's like if marketing can't align themselves to a successful growth use case within the organization, analytics also can struggle with those same challenges. And so a lot of times when I meet with people, it's helping them even craft like what the right metric or use case for data even would be. I think the challenge for some people is not like they don't think that there's opportunities for it, is it's helping kind of define like what is that use case. And I think everyone's kind of looking for that like moonshot type, like how do I get the AI chat GPT version of the next like algorithm that's going to take my organization to the next level. And it's more about like what are the things you're already doing well and how can we automate that so that you can focus on the next big moonshot that you can use your natural intuition as an entrepreneur to go after. So it can be simple things like that of like how to get them out of making the day-to-day decisions so they can open up their time elsewhere. But another thing that we do is just, all right, let's prove that we can find an insight that you may not be thinking about, and through collecting data from their various applications, uh, it is very rare that we ever like dig in and then it's like you don't see something that is actually an interesting customer attribute, location that you're not marketing to, product that you're not thinking about selling. I mean, we even helped just a really simple example, like a manufacturer that figured out that even their delivery time options that they're offering to customers, like next day shipping, 7-day shipping, anytime a customer was selecting 3 to 5 day shipping, more than not, they were going to get their order late. And that insight allowed them to completely revamp their internal project management processes of saying like, just because somebody says 3 to 5 days doesn't mean we don't have to worry about them. We need to prioritize them. And I mean, that alone led to huge customer retention because these people were underserved on just a basic thing about delivery timeframes that as an owner, you might not actually see that, right? You just, all you see and hear is that our orders are arriving late, but you want to find out the cause and effect analysis of that. And that's what data allows you to do.
Yeah, and and again, I'm a marketing guy, and you kind of as you talk, things just come back to me. And one of the my pet peeves was when once in a while we have somebody either call us or email us and complain about something, right? I took each complaint very seriously, and it's just like the way I'm wired for. Like every complaint's important, and I would take it to my employer, and he would always say, "Well, how many or more of these complaints have we gotten?" And I said, "Well, maybe one or two." And he said, "Then it's not really a problem, is it?" So I said, "No, it is, because for everyone that took the time to complain, there's X number of customers that just went away and we'll never know about it."
Mm-hmm.
So what you're bringing up is absolutely brilliant. Just because you offer 3 to 5 days or expedited shipping, and people want that because they want the product or the service, whatever that might be, you need to track your performance, because if you're falling short, they might just go somewhere else. Because they,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you pay the expediting fees to get something quicker and it doesn't come in. How many people actually come back to that company and say, I paid for 3 to 5 days, I got it 7 days later, I want a refund, or I
Mm-hmm.
want you to adjust down to what ground shipping was, right? Not many people bother doing it. So why is that? Well, because they know they're going to get all kinds of stories, so they just say, you know what, I'm going to find it somewhere else. Unless you're unique and you have something no one else does, what you pointed out is absolutely critical, right? Don't make assumptions on how your business operates. Test for it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the numbers. And if it shows that your performance is lacking, then yeah, you better fix it or stop offering it. One of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, so this is a completely left out of the left field question, but I was very jealous when I read that you took a year off with your wife and you went traveling all over the world.
Yeah.
So, number one, you're a young guy. How were you able to do that? And two, what did that do to you as not just as a person, but just your perspective generally about life in the pursuit of happiness? You saw a bunch of, I don't remember, I'm scrolling on the side, LinkedIn, to see what you said. But you go ahead, you tell me. So you took a year off and you visited some, I don't know, 28 countries, whatever the number was. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. 2016 rolled around, and my wife and I embarked on a quarter life retirement, is what we branded it as. For us, we've always done a little bit of travel during high school, college. We met in college. We've never really like traveled together. And for me, one of my personal life goals is to always travel to more countries than my age. So it's something that just keeps me trucking. So I had a little bit of catch up to do. So when for many reasons in 2016, we decided that that was going to be the best time to go. For at our life stage at that point, we'd been married for 2 years, but no house, no kids, no, there wasn't much other than our careers were progressing really nicely. So we left with a one-way ticket to Tokyo. Clothes in our backpacks were all we had, no checked luggage. And the general idea was to stay at hostels, travel super cheap, spend big on experiences. And then as we moved between hostels, we would talk with other hostel travelers at hostels, and kind of figure out where we wanted to go next and buy plane tickets about 3 to 7 days in advance of what that next adventure would be. And the highest theme was just trying to follow the sun. So it'd be in perpetual summer between the southern and northern hemisphere. We were able to pull it off because we had been saving up to put a down payment on our house. And instead of buying a house, we just took all of that and blew it all on travel for a year. Our parents thought we were crazy. They probably still do think we're crazy, but for us, we had always kind of heard from people that, like, as you get more into the life stages and having kids and having a house, like, there's always more and more reasons for you not to do something like that. And for me, I want to live like a really great life story. For me personally, what that adventure gave, like, first of all, it's the ultimate marriage test. You spend 24/7 with your significant other for 11 and a half months. You're bound to get really close.
Mm-hmm.
So that was awesome from that perspective. But also for me personally, it was the first time I've been kind of just like unemployed again. I didn't have school. I didn't have any kind of job. And for me, it's just when you have 11 and a half months to kind of think about what you want to be doing in life. And, I pick up Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week book that, everyone I'm sure reads at some point in their life. That really got me thinking about living kind of an unconventional life. I don't have any entrepreneurs in my family. So I kind of recognized that there was a pattern where I could do something that wasn't just a normal corporate career. And I think I attribute that trip to just opening up my mindset. I took on consulting engagements while we were traveling just because I was bored in Southeast Asia. And for me, that really set this whole stage of, I really want to control my destiny and signing up for entrepreneurship. And I mean, that's what's led to all of this growth that I've personally had over the last 7.5, 8 years since doing it.
What's again, I keep trying to pinpoint you to one thing, but if there was one big lesson, one big takeaway, one big experience you took from doing this incredible year-long travel, what was it?
Yeah. For me, the biggest eye opening experience was traveling through Southeast Asia. We spent a little over 3.5 months there. And some of the countries we went to, especially like Myanmar/Burma, it was a whole different level of living, a different concept of like what living a good life was. I mean, many people were like living in shacks, just like living that something that wasn't, I deemed kind of like the American dream of like big fancy house and all the cars and stuff
Mm.
like that. And I think what I really loved about Southeast Asia culture in general, but I mean, specifically in countries where that's just like I don't know what the right word to call it, but like standard of living is just different than America. Uh, what I saw was really happy people feeling very fulfilled. And for me, I've always been just kind of on this like pursuit of happiness. And I think that kind of reset for me what it means to live a good life. That it's going to sound like really fluffy travel stuff, but being around the people that matter, doing fun experiences, living life to the fullest, making the most of your day. All of those things are true when you're unemployed in the middle of Southeast Asia. You're, a white male amongst everyone who's not.
Mhm.
And I think for me, it just completely changed my perspective of like what I wanted to pursue in life. And yeah, that was probably one of the biggest moments for me. That's made me feel comfortable, I think, taking a lot of the risk, air quotes, risk that I've done with entrepreneurship.
And I mean, I haven't done anywhere near what you've done, but it also gives you really good perspective about not just life in general, because that sounds pretty lofty, but um, appreciating what you have, right? Because
That
we're so programmed in this country towards materialism, and success is measured by the house you have and the car you drive and how many times redecorated your kitchen and bathroom. And when you go outside and you realize that the rest of the world doesn't act this way
yeah,
and doesn't
yeah.
live this way, right? It's, I mean, hopefully it stays with you. It's not like you go on a cruise ship and then you land and you give an excursion to a place and you go through shacks and you say, oh wow, look at these people. And then you go back to the cruise ship with the unlimited buffet and you forgot
Yeah.
about it, right? This is not the same thing.
Yeah.
Um,
100%. It's all about, yeah, perspective more than anything. It's like worst comes to worst is like if the worst thing that happens is that I get stuck with the clothes on my back in the middle of Southeast Asia with no money to my name, like it was probably one of the happiest moments of my life when I did that. So, life can't get much worse.
yeah. Well, good for you. And it's amazing that you've done it before you got sucked into the house and the babies and everything else. So, uh, and you have something to tell your kids about it. I have a childhood friend. I haven't seen him in many, many years, but he was a sailor and he actually sailed around the world, and that was an
Oh, it's amazing.
incredible experience and scary. So look, if I gave you a billboard in New York City in Times Square
Ooh,
and said, "Look, you can write any message you want on it for people to see every day," what would that say?
man, this is such a unique question.
I try.
Uh,
I try. I mean, I don't typically share my questions in advance. This is the only part of questions that I usually end with, but I apologize. I didn't actually send it to you. I usually send those so you're not gonna stuck. But anyway, it's okay. It's just a podcast. What comes to mind without overthinking it?
yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go back to the quote that I live by because I think it's just an awesome billboard. Would be live a great story. A big old picture of me.
There you go. Excellent. Who's one person that influenced you the most in your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I it's probably a typical answer, but like I've been most inspired by both my parents have just given me great attributes that I really live by. My dad is one of the hardest working guys that I've ever met, and he cares about people. He works super hard, and then my mom, I think, has always given me kind of like that operations mindset, the aspirational, like just go take over the world type thing. And I know it's like you kind of win the human lottery when you get parents that instill really great values that have allowed me the freedom to kind of dream a little bit bigger. And I'm just very grateful for how they raised me.
Yeah, I mean it's generally either the parents or the mom or the dad for whatever circumstances there are. But um, I would just say, as somebody who's much older, um, don't ever underestimate what your parents are giving you or have given you. We so often
Mm,
take it for granted, and it's funny how we learn to appreciate it way, way, way too late in life, and at times
yeah.
they're not around anymore, right? So you're young enough where you recognize the values that they instilled in you, and that what makes you a better person. Um,
Yep.
the business
100%.
the business success is should be secondary. Just being a better person is really the key. So look, I'm going to share your contact info of how people can find you, the company that can find Luke on. There's not too many Luke Komiskeys on LinkedIn. There's some names where you search for them. There are 17 pages, but Luke's on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. There's companies called DataDrive. All your contact info will be on my podcast summary page. And again, thank you so much for doing it. I think we got a good perspective from you on what data is and how entrepreneurs can and should use it to make smarter decisions. I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, my pleasure. Take care.